Sarah Thompson walked through the bright hallways of Atlanta General Hospital, her white coat swishing with each confident step. At 32 years old, she had already made a name for herself as one of the most dedicated physical therapists in the facility. Her colleagues often joked that she spent more time with her patients than at her own home, but Sarah didn't mind. Helping people recover and regain their strength gave her life meaning. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Sarah checked her schedule and noticed a new patient assigned to her, Marcus Bennett, age 35, involved in a severe car accident 3 months ago. The medical notes indicated he was paralyzed from the waist down. As she walked toward room 407, Sarah took a deep breath, preparing herself to meet another soul whose life had been turned upside down. When she entered the room, Sarah found Marcus sitting in his wheelchair, staring out the window. He didn't turn to look at her immediately. The morning sunlight highlighted the tension in his shoulders and the slight tremor in his hands as they rested on the wheelchair's armrests. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. I'm Sarah Thompson, a physical therapist," she said warmly, moving into his line of sight. When Marcus finally turned to face her, Sarah saw pain in his eyes. Not just physical pain, but the deep emotional kind that came with losing one's independence. "Look," Marcus said, his voice firm but tired, "I know you're just doing your job, but I don't think I'm ready for this." He gestured to the therapy equipment around the room. "I used to be a dance instructor, you know. Now I can't even feel my legs. How am I supposed to deal with that?" Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down, making sure they were at eye level. She had worked with many patients before, but something about Marcus's directness touched her. "Mr. Bennett, I'm not here to push you into anything you're not ready for. But I am here to help you discover what you can still do, rather than focus on what you can't." For the first time, a tiny smile crossed Marcus's face. "You don't give up easily, do you, Ms. Thompson?" "That's right," Sarah replied with a gentle laugh, "and please call me Sarah." Over the next hour, Sarah explained the therapy process, showing Marcus simple exercises they would start with. She noticed how carefully he listened, even though his face remained skeptical. When she demonstrated a basic upper body movement, Marcus attempted to copy it, his frustration visible when he couldn't maintain proper form. "Hey, it's okay," Sarah assured him. "Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is recovery. Small steps, remember?" As she helped him adjust his position, Sarah noticed the calluses on his hands, remnants of his dancing days. "What kind of dance did you teach?" she asked, hoping to distract him from his current struggle. Marcus's eyes lit up for the first time since she'd entered the room. "Everything from ballroom to hip-hop. But my specialty was salsa. There's nothing like the energy of Latin dance, the way the music moves through you." His voice trailed off, and the light in his eyes dimmed again. Sarah watched as he retreated back into himself, but she had seen enough. Beneath the pain and frustration was a man with passion, with dreams. She made a mental note to incorporate music into their future sessions. As their first session came to an end, Sarah helped Marcus schedule his next appointment. "Same time Thursday?" she asked, marking it in her calendar. "Do I have a choice?" Marcus replied, but this time there was a hint of humor in his voice. "There's always a choice, Mr. Bennett, but I hope you'll choose to come back." After Marcus left, Sarah stood in the empty therapy room, thinking about their session. In her years as a therapist, she had learned to maintain professional boundaries with her patients, but something about Marcus felt different. His story, his struggle, and his hidden strength touched her in a way she hadn't expected. Little did Sarah know that this routine Tuesday morning marked the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. As she walked back to her office, she smiled, already looking forward to their next session, completely unaware that fate had just set in motion a love story that would prove stronger than any obstacle life could throw their way. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah and Marcus's first meeting, and their therapy sessions were becoming the highlight of both their days, though neither would admit it. Today, Sarah noticed something different about Marcus as she entered the therapy room. He had arrived early and was already doing some of the warm-up exercises she had taught him. "Someone's eager to start," Sarah said with a smile, checking his form. "Your upper body strength is improving faster than I expected." Marcus adjusted his position in the wheelchair and grinned. "Well, I had a good teacher, though I still think these exercises are trying to kill me." Sarah laughed, the sound echoing through the room. She had noticed how Marcus used humor to hide his pain, but she could see the small victories adding up. His arms were stronger now, and he could maneuver his wheelchair with more confidence. During their session, while helping Marcus with a particularly challenging exercise, Sarah noticed old photographs falling out of his jacket pocket. She picked them up, and her eyes widened. The pictures showed Marcus in his dancing days, spinning and dipping his partner on a brightly lit stage. "You weren't kidding about being a dance instructor," she said softly, studying the joy on his face in the photos. "You look so alive here." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests. "That was a different life," he finally said. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I can still feel the rhythm in my feet, you know? Then reality hits." Instead of offering empty words of comfort, Sarah pulled out her phone and played a salsa song. "The rhythm isn't just in your feet, Marcus. It's in your heart, your hands, your smile." She moved to the music, demonstrating how upper body movements could capture the essence of dance. "Are you always this optimistic?" Marcus asked, but he was already moving his shoulders to the beat. "Only on days ending in I," Sarah replied, making him laugh despite himself. As weeks turned into a month, their sessions became more than just physical therapy. They talked about everything: their families, their dreams, their fears. Sarah learned that Marcus had grown up in Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to put him through dance school. He told her about his first dance competition, where he placed last but discovered his love for teaching others. Marcus, in turn, learned about Sarah's journey as a black woman in healthcare, how she'd faced doubts and prejudices, but never let them dim her spirit. He admired how she treated every patient with the same warmth and dedication, regardless of their background. One rainy Thursday, Marcus arrived at therapy looking particularly down. Sarah could tell something was wrong as soon as she saw him. "My sister visited yesterday," he explained, his voice heavy. "She brought her kids. My nephew, Tommy, he's 4. He asked why Uncle Marcus couldn't dance with him anymore." Marcus's voice cracked. "How do you explain something like that to a child?" Sarah knelt beside his wheelchair. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that sometimes light changes our dance moves, but it doesn't stop the music." Marcus wiped his eyes quickly. "Sorry, I don't mean to dump all this on you." "Hey," Sarah touched his hand gently. "You're not dumping anything. We're in this together, remember?" That simple touch lingered between them, carrying more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. Sarah quickly stood up, her professional training kicking in, but something had shifted. As their session ended, Marcus hesitated before leaving. "Sarah," he said, turning his wheelchair back toward her, "thank you. Not just for the therapy, but for seeing me as more than just another patient in a wheelchair." Sarah watched him leave, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She knew she was crossing into dangerous territory. Developing feelings for a patient went against every professional boundary she had set for herself, but there was something about Marcus that made all her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. That evening, as Sarah drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Marcus's eyes lit up when he talked about dance, or how his smile seemed to make the whole room brighter. She tried to remind herself that he was just another patient, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true anymore. 3 months into their therapy sessions, Sarah found herself looking forward to seeing Marcus more than any other patient. She would catch herself smiling whenever she saw his name on her schedule, and she started taking extra care with her appearance on the days he came in. One Tuesday morning, everything changed. Sarah was running late to work because of heavy traffic, and when she finally rushed into the therapy room, she found Marcus waiting with a cup of coffee on her desk. "I heard you like caramel lattes," he said with a shy smile. "The cafeteria lady told me it's your favorite." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "You didn't have to do that," she said, but she couldn't hide her pleasure at his thoughtfulness. "Well, you've been helping me for months. Thought it was time I did something nice for you," Marcus replied, watching as she took a sip. During that day's session, Sarah noticed how Marcus's eyes followed her movements around the room. She also caught herself looking at him more often than necessary, admiring his determination as he worked through each exercise. "You know," Marcus said during a break, "I used to think my life was over after the accident. But lately, I've been feeling different." He paused, gathering courage. "I think a lot of that has to do with you, Sarah." Sarah felt her cheeks grow warm. "Marcus, I'm just doing my job," she said softly, but they both knew that wasn't entirely true anymore. Later that week, during their regular session, Marcus surprised her by bringing music again. But this time, instead of salsa, it was a slow, romantic song. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, his voice nervous but hopeful. "I may be in this chair, but I still remember how to lead." Sarah hesitated, knowing she was crossing a line, but something in her heart wouldn't let her say no. She stepped closer, and Marcus took her hand, guiding her in a slow circle around his wheelchair. His upper body movements were graceful, and despite being seated, he led her beautifully. "See," he said softly, "some things you never forget." As they moved together, Sarah realized she was falling in love. It wasn't just his strength or his determination that attracted her. It was his kindness, his humor, the way he saw the world with both realism and hope. The next day, Sarah's colleague, Lisa, noticed something different about her. "Girl, you're glowing," Lisa said during lunch break. "What's going on?" Sarah tried to deny it, but Lisa wasn't fooled. "It's that patient of yours, isn't it? Marcus, I've seen how you look at each other." "He's my patient, Lisa. Nothing can happen," Sarah insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Sometimes the heart doesn't care about professional boundaries," Lisa replied wisely. "But you need to be careful, both for his sake and yours." That evening, after her last patient had left, Sarah found a note in her office. It was from Marcus. "Thank you for dancing with me yesterday. For the first time since my accident, I felt like myself again." Sarah sat at her desk, reading the note over and over. She knew she had to make a decision. As a professional, she should transfer Marcus to another therapist. But the thought of not seeing him regularly made her heart ache. The next day, Marcus arrived for his session looking serious. Before Sarah could start their exercises, he spoke up. "I've been thinking, Sarah. I know this is complicated because you're my therapist, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore. Would you have dinner with me? Not as a patient and therapist, but just as Marcus and Sarah." Sarah's heart raced. She had been preparing herself for this moment, trying to find the right words to maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she found herself saying, "Yes." The smile that lit up Marcus's face made any doubts she had fade away. They both knew this wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, prejudices, and difficulties to face. But in that moment, as they looked at each other with hope and possibility in their eyes, none of that seemed to matter. That evening, as Sarah wrote her daily patient notes, she couldn't stop smiling. Love had found her in the most unexpected place, proving once again that the heart follows its own rules, regardless of life's circumstances. After their first official date at a small Italian restaurant near the hospital, Sarah and Marcus's relationship quickly became the talk of Atlanta General Hospital. Sarah had transferred Marcus to another physical therapist, Dr. James, so they could pursue their relationship properly. But not everyone was happy about their decision to be together. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah sat in her parents' living room, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her mother, Gloria Thompson, paced back and forth while her father, Richard, sat quietly in his favorite armchair. "Have you really thought this through, Sarah?" Gloria asked, stopping to look at her daughter. "Being with someone with a disability isn't easy. You're a physical therapist. You know better than anyone how challenging it can be." Sarah took a deep breath. "Mom, I know exactly what I'm getting into. Marcus is more than his disability. He's kind, funny, and he makes me happier than I've ever been. But what about children?" Gloria pressed on. "What about your future? And let's be honest, you're already facing enough challenges as a black woman in healthcare. Do you want to add more complications to your life?" "Gloria," Richard finally spoke up, his voice firm but gentle. "Our daughter is a grown woman. She can make her own choices." But Sarah could see the worry in her father's eyes too. Later that evening, as she was leaving, he pulled her aside. "Baby girl, we just want what's best for you. Are you sure about this?" Meanwhile, Marcus was facing his own battles at home. His mother, Patricia Bennett, had invited his entire family over for dinner to discuss the situation. Marcus sat in his wheelchair at the dining table, surrounded by concerned faces. "A black woman?" his older sister Karen said, shaking her head. "Marcus, it's not that we're prejudiced, but have you thought about how complicated this could make things?" "More complicated than being in a wheelchair?" Marcus shot back, his frustration evident. "Sarah sees me for who I am, not what I can't do. Why can't you all do the same?" His younger brother Tom spoke up. We're just worried, bro. She's your former therapist. What if she's just feeling sorry for you? Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Sarah doesn't pity me. She challenges me, supports me, and loves me for who I am. I won't let anyone, not even my family, disrespect what we have. The next day, Sarah and Marcus met at their favorite coffee shop. They both looked tired from their family confrontations. So, Marcus said, trying to smile, I guess your family meeting went about as well as mine. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. They'll come around. And if they don't, it's their loss. I'm not giving up on us. Marcus squeezed her hand. Me neither, but Sarah, are you sure about this? My family's right about one thing. Life with me won't be easy. Sarah looked into his eyes. Life isn't easy anyway. At least with you, the hard parts are worth it. As they left the coffee shop, they noticed people staring, some with curiosity, others with obvious disapproval. An elderly woman even shook her head as they passed by. Maybe we should get used to this, Marcus said quietly. Let them stare, Sarah replied, walking proudly beside him. Their small-mindedness is their problem, not ours. That evening, as Sarah drove home, she thought about everything their families had said. Yes, they would face challenges. Yes, life would be complicated. But when she thought about Marcus's smile, his strength, the way he made her laugh even on her worst days, she knew in her heart that she was making the right choice. She pulled over to the side of the road and called Marcus. Hey, she said when he answered, I just wanted to tell you something. No matter what anyone says, no matter how hard things get, I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. On the other end of the line, Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I choose you too, Sarah. Always. Their love was being tested by family disapproval and societal prejudices, but instead of weakening their bond, these challenges only made it stronger. They were learning that true love didn't just survive opposition, it thrived in spite of it. 6 months into their relationship, Marcus had been secretly working with Dr. James, his new physical therapist, on a special project. Every Tuesday and Thursday, when Sarah was busy with her own patients on the other side of the hospital, Marcus pushed himself harder than ever before. Just a little more, Dr. James encouraged one afternoon, as Marcus struggled to maintain his balance using the parallel bars. Sweat dripped down his face, but his determination never wavered. I have to do this, Marcus said through gritted teeth. It has to be perfect. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had been practicing how to balance himself just long enough to do something very special. He had also been meeting with a local jeweler during his free time, designing a ring that would be as unique as their love story. On a warm Friday evening, Marcus invited Sarah to the hospital's rehabilitation garden. This place held special meaning for them. It was where they had shared their first kiss, hidden among the blooming flowers and quiet fountains. Why are we here so late? Sarah asked, noticing that the garden was unusually empty. As they rounded the corner, she gasped. The entire space was lit with hundreds of tiny lights, and soft music played in the background. It was the same song they had danced to during their therapy session months ago. Marcus, what is all this? Sarah's voice trembled as she took in the beautiful scene. Marcus smiled mysteriously and wheeled himself to the center of the garden. Dr. James appeared from behind a bush, giving Marcus a subtle nod. Sarah Thompson, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. When I first came to this hospital, I thought my life was over. I was angry at the world, bitter about everything I had lost. He paused, taking her hand. But then I met you, and you showed me that life doesn't end when things get hard. It just takes a different path. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as Marcus continued to speak. You never saw me as just a man in a wheelchair. You saw me as a dancer who had lost his stage, but not his rhythm. You saw me as a man who could still love, still dream, still hope. Then, with Dr. James standing nearby for safety, Marcus did something that made Sarah's heart stop. Using all the strength he had built up over months of secret practice, he engaged the locks on his wheelchair and, holding onto the specially installed bars Dr. James had helped attach, pushed himself up to balance on his arms. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, her hands covering her mouth. Marcus, though shaking with effort, managed to reach into his pocket and pull out a small velvet box. I may not be able to get down on one knee the traditional way, he said, his voice full of emotion, but I can still ask you to make me the happiest man alive. Sarah was openly crying now, watching as Marcus balanced himself with one hand while holding out the ring with the other. Sarah Thompson, will you marry me? The garden fell silent except for the gentle splash of the fountain. Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Marcus's face lit up with joy as Sarah took the ring, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by diamonds. As she slipped it on her finger, Marcus carefully lowered himself back into his wheelchair, exhausted but happy. I can't believe you did all this, Sarah said, admiring how the ring caught the light. How long have you been planning this? 3 months, Marcus admitted. Dr. James helped me build up my strength. I wanted to show you that with enough love and determination, anything is possible. As they sat together in the glowing garden, Sarah couldn't stop looking at her ring. It was then that Marcus revealed one more surprise. Turn it over, he said softly. On the inside of the band, Sarah found an engraving. Love doesn't need perfect steps to dance perfectly. That night, as they celebrated with a small dinner Marcus had arranged at their favorite restaurant, both knew that they had just begun the most beautiful chapter of their story. Despite all the challenges they had faced and would face, their love had proven stronger than any obstacle life could put in their way. 3 months before their wedding day, Sarah and Marcus's lives became a whirlwind of planning and preparations. Their small apartment was filled with wedding magazines, color swatches, and to-do lists that seemed to grow longer every day. Who knew picking flowers could be so complicated? Sarah sighed one evening, surrounded by pictures of different bouquets. She looked over at Marcus, who was being unusually quiet while looking at his phone. What are you doing over there? You've been glued to that phone all week. Marcus quickly put his phone away. Just some wedding stuff, he said with a mysterious smile. Don't worry about it. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had been secretly meeting with Tom, his younger brother, who had finally come around and was now helping him prepare something special for the wedding. 3 times a week, while Sarah was at work, Marcus would go to a private physical therapy center across town. You're pushing yourself too hard, Tom warned one day, watching his brother practice. Maybe we should tell Sarah. No, Marcus said firmly, wiping sweat from his forehead. I want this to be a surprise. She deserves something magical. Meanwhile, their families were slowly warming up to the idea of their marriage. Sarah's mother, Gloria, surprised everyone by offering to help with the wedding preparations. One Saturday, while they were looking at wedding dresses, Gloria watched her daughter try on a beautiful white gown. You know, Gloria said softly, I was wrong about Marcus. The way that man looks at you, that's the kind of love every mother wants for her daughter. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she hugged her mother. Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me. The wedding venue was another challenge they needed to tackle. They wanted somewhere that was both beautiful and accessible. After visiting several places, they found a perfect garden venue with wide paths and ramps hidden elegantly among the landscaping. It's perfect, Marcus said, easily maneuvering his wheelchair around the space. I can see us getting married right here, under these trees. As the weeks passed, Sarah noticed Marcus was getting more secretive. He was having private conversations with their wedding planner, Jessica, and spending a lot of time at mysterious appointments. When Sarah asked about it, he would just smile and say, It's a surprise for our big day. One day, Sarah overheard Marcus on the phone. Yes, the measurements need to be exact. No, she doesn't know anything about it. Yes, I'll need it delivered the morning of the wedding. Her curiosity was killing her, but everyone seemed to be in on the secret. Even Lisa from the hospital would change the subject whenever Sarah brought it up. 2 weeks before the wedding, during their dance lesson, which they had modified for Marcus's wheelchair, their instructor, David, kept giving Marcus strange looks and nodding meaningfully. Sarah pretended not to notice, but her mind was racing with possibilities. Should I be worried about all these secrets? She asked Marcus that evening. Marcus took her hand and kissed it softly. Trust me, my love. Everything I do is to make our wedding day perfect for you. The final week before the wedding was a blur of activity. Their families came together to help with the last-minute details. Even Marcus's sister Karen, who had been the most opposed to their relationship, was now helping to decorate the venue. You know, Karen said to Sarah while they were arranging centerpieces, "I'd never seen my brother so happy. Thank you for loving him the way you do." The night before the wedding, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood by their apartment window, looking at her engagement ring sparkle in the moonlight. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Tomorrow, I'm going to show you that love can make anything possible. I can't wait to marry you." Sarah smiled, her heart full of love and curiosity. Whatever surprise Marcus was planning, she knew it would be special because it came from his heart. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of their tomorrow, not knowing that Marcus was still awake across town, practicing one last time for the moment that would take her breath away. The morning of their wedding dawned bright and clear. Sarah stood at her hotel room window, watching the sun rise over Atlanta's skyline. Her hands trembled slightly as her mother helped her into her wedding dress, a beautiful white gown with delicate lace sleeves and tiny pearls sewn into the bodice. "Something's going on," Sarah said, watching her bridesmaids whispering in the corner. "Everyone's acting strange today." Lisa, her maid of honor, quickly changed the subject. "Girl, let's focus on making you even more beautiful, if that's possible." But Sarah noticed how Lisa kept checking her phone and exchanging mysterious texts. Across town, Marcus was in a flurry of activity in his own hotel suite. His brother Tom and Dr. James were with him, helping him prepare for something more than just putting on his tuxedo. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked, watching Marcus go through his morning exercises with intense focus. "I've never been more sure of anything," Marcus replied, determination written across his face. "Today has to be perfect." The ceremony was set for 2 p.m. in the garden venue they had chosen. Guests began arriving, filling the rows of white chairs set up on either side of the flower-lined aisle. Sarah peeked through the window of her bridal suite, watching as Marcus's wheelchair was positioned at the altar. He looked handsome in his black tuxedo, his smile bright enough to light up the entire garden. "It's time," Gloria said softly, adjusting Sarah's veil one last time. Sarah's father, Richard, appeared at the door, his eyes filling with tears when he saw his daughter. "Baby girl," he whispered, "you look absolutely beautiful." He held out his arm, and Sarah took it, her heart pounding with excitement. The music began to play, a soft, romantic melody that floated through the garden. One by one, the bridesmaids made their way down the aisle, their blue dresses matching the summer sky. Then the wedding march started, and everyone stood. Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She was radiant, her dark skin glowing against the white of her dress, her smile brighter than any star he'd ever seen. As she walked toward him on her father's arm, Marcus could hardly believe this amazing woman was about to become his wife. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. They had written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the garden when Marcus spoke about how Sarah had taught him to dance with his heart when his legs could no longer move. Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she promised to love him through every step of their journey together. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister announced, and their guests erupted in applause as Sarah leaned down to kiss her new husband. The garden had been transformed for the reception, with twinkling lights strung between the trees and tables decorated with blue and white flowers. Marcus and Sarah made their way to the head table, where Sarah noticed something odd. There was no wheelchair space set aside. "Marcus?" she questioned, but he just smiled and squeezed her hand. Their families and friends gave touching speeches. Even Karen, Marcus's sister, stood up to say how wrong she had been about their love. "You two have taught us all what real love looks like," she said, raising her glass. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, the DJ announced it was time for the first dance. Sarah saw Tom and Dr. James moving quickly toward Marcus and noticed a strange contraption being wheeled onto the dance floor. "What's going on?" she asked, but Marcus just held her hand tighter. "Trust me," he whispered, his eyes shining with anticipation. "This is the moment I've been preparing for." The garden fell silent as everyone turned to watch. Sarah's heart was racing, knowing that whatever was about to happen would be the surprise Marcus had been planning all these months. As the first notes of music began to play, she held her breath, not knowing that in just a few moments, she would witness something that would make their wedding day even more magical than she had ever imagined. The familiar opening notes of "At Last" by Etta James filled the garden. Every guest held their breath as they watched Tom and Dr. James approach Marcus's wheelchair. Sarah stood in the middle of the dance floor, her heart racing as she tried to understand what was happening. Marcus wheeled himself to the center of the dance floor, stopping right in front of Sarah. For months, he said, his voice carrying across the silent garden, I've been working on giving you the first dance you deserve. Tom stepped forward with what looked like a specialized harness, while Dr. James moved to Marcus's other side. Sarah watched in amazement as they attached the harness to Marcus's upper body. Behind them, a strong metal frame had been quietly wheeled into place. Marcus, Sarah whispered, tears already forming in her eyes. What are you doing? Dancing with my wife, he answered with a smile that lit up his entire face. With practiced movements, Tom and Dr. James helped secure Marcus to the support frame. Then, using the strength he had built up through months of secret training, Marcus pressed a button on his wheelchair. The frame began to move, and slowly, steadily, Marcus rose to his feet. Gasps of surprise and joy echoed through the garden. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. There was Marcus, her husband, standing before her, supported by the frame but upright, at eye level with her for the first time since they'd met. May I have this dance? Marcus asked, holding out his hand. Sarah stepped forward, taking his hand as the music swelled around them. The support frame was designed to allow movement, and Marcus had practiced for countless hours to perfect this moment. Together, they began to sway to the music. I can't believe you did this, Sarah said through her tears, as Marcus held her close. For you, he whispered, I would move mountains. Their guests watched in awe as the couple moved together on the dance floor. The frame allowed Marcus to turn slowly, and though his movements were limited, the love between them made every step perfect. Gloria Thompson sobbed openly in her husband's arms, while Patricia Bennett wiped tears from her eyes. As they danced, Marcus shared his secret. Every time you were at work, I was practicing. The frame was designed specially for this dance. Tom, Dr. James, and even Karen helped me keep it a secret. That's why everyone was acting so strange today, Sarah realized, laughing through her tears. I wanted to show you and everyone else that love doesn't have limits, Marcus said. That when you believe in someone, anything is possible. The music continued, and Sarah rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, breathing in the moment she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Around them, their guests had pulled out their phones, recording this magical moment, but Sarah and Marcus were lost in their own world. I love you, Sarah whispered, looking into her husband's eyes. Not because you can stand or dance, but because of who you are. I love you too, Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for showing me that life's greatest gifts often come in unexpected packages. As the song came to an end, their guests erupted in applause. Some were crying, others were cheering, but everyone had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a man standing up to dance with his bride, but the power of love to overcome any obstacle. Later that night, after Marcus was back in his wheelchair and the celebration continued around them, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. She watched as their families mingled together, all previous doubts and prejudices forgotten in the face of such powerful love. Marcus caught her hand and kissed it. Happy, Mrs. Bennett. More than I ever thought possible, she replied, squeezing his hand. Their wedding day had turned into something more than just a celebration of their love. It had become a testament to the power of determination, the strength of the human spirit, and the truth that real love knows no boundaries. As they looked out at their friends and family celebrating around them, both Sarah and Marcus knew that this was just the beginning of their extraordinary journey together.